In this video, we are going to look at switch statements. Switch statements are a way that we can check a condition and have multiple branches. A switch statement can always be replaced with a string of if-else-if statements. Although when if-else-if statements get too long, they can get hard to read, and a switch statement is a little bit easier. So there's a time when either one can work. But let's take a look at switch. So a switch statement basically uses the keyword switch, and in parentheses for the condition of the switch statement, we have to stick something, something that we're going to compare to these cases. So in this case, status, I think this is supposed to be like an income tax program where you pick your status. If you're single, you pick 0. If you're married filing jointly, you pick 1. If you're married filing separately, you would pick 2. If you're head of household, you would pick 3. And then there's a default. Okay, so status, or anything that's in a switch statement for that matter, has to be of a certain type. In this case, we're checking integers. Okay, so status is obviously an integer because we're comparing it to integers here. Switch statements can only be used with chars and strings, which we're going to be learning about in chapter 5, byte, which is a type of integer, short, which is a type of integer, or ints. Okay, so you're limited on what you can use with a switch statement. But basically, whatever the value of status is, it's going to look for a case that matches, and then it's going to do whatever code goes along with that case. And obviously, we can use code blocks here if we want to. Okay. But one other thing I want to point out is that there's a break statement for every case. Okay, so if I put in status 1 here, it's going to come down to case 1, and it's going to do whatever code is in here to compute taxes for married filing jointly, and then it's going to break, and the break is what makes the switch statement end. If you don't put the break, it's automatically going to fall. It's called falling through. It's going to fall through and do case 2 as well, even though it didn't match 2. So every case needs to have a break unless you're designing it in a manner where you purposely don't have the breaks. And let's take a look at some examples of that. Well, let's look at a flow chart. So there's our diamond decision structure. We're basically taking whatever status we have, testing to see if it's 0, we do this one. If it's 1, we do this one. If it's 2, we do this one. Each one of them flows to a break. Once it hits the break, the program ends. So this is a flow chart. The diamonds are shrunk down a little bit here. So we talked about the switch expression that has to be in the parentheses. Can be char, byte, short, or int. It must always be enclosed in parentheses. All these values have to have the same data type as the switch expression, otherwise you can't compare them together. So if switch expression is an int, all the values have to be ints. Okay. I talked about needing a break statement in every single one, and then the default, if none of the cases match the default, whatever statements we put in here, the default statements will run. So that's kind of like the else at the end of a string of else ifs is the default. Notice they say the keyword break is optional, but it should be used at the end of each case in order to terminate the remainder. We'll see examples when we don't use a break for certain things. And here's a case of that. So if I put in 2 for the day, okay, this is a one where we put in the day of the week as a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Notice case 1 does not have a break statement. Case 2 does not have a break statement. Neither does 3 or 4. But case 5 does have a break statement. And notice they're also putting 2 statements on one line here to keep this shorter. So this statement ends at the semicolon. Then break is on the same line. So what happens if the day is day 2? When we get to the switch statement, it's going to jump down and look at case 2. And we don't even have any code there. But not having a code there means we also don't have a break. So it's going to fall through to case 3. If 3 doesn't have a break, it's going to fall through to case 4. 4 doesn't have a break, it's going to fall through to case 5. It's going to print system out print line weekday, and then it's going to break. So if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, doesn't matter where we enter, it's going to print out weekday. So this is a case where leaving out the breaks lets us check for multiple cases to print out this one result. And then 0 must be Sunday, and 6 is probably Saturday, I'm assuming. Same thing if it picks Sunday 0 or Saturday a 6, system.out.println weekend. So 0 falls through to 6 because they both have the same result. Again, you purposely leave out the breaks only when you have a well-defined series of logic where you want the cases to fall through. Okay, there's the break, and then we have the, once it matches one of them, it jumps down past the last curly brace for the switch statement and exits the curly brace. Write a program that prompts the user to enter a year and displays the animal for the year. So if the year modulus 12 ends with a 0, so if the year is divisible by 12, it's year of the monkey. The year after that is year of the rooster, then year of the dog. Let's look at an example of this. So I want to show you this program. So we're switching on the year modulus 12, which is an integer. So we're asking the user for an integer for the year. Okay, and then we print out 0. We have a case for each one, and each one has a break. Now, this is concise and easy to read, and each one has a break, but I do want to show you probably a little better formatting for it, and this will help you with all of your code. I also notice some of my indents. This is indented a little bit more than scanner. Some of my indents are a little bit off, and it might need cleaned up. So I'm going to go up here to source and click format, and it prints it. It's not as concise, but it's a more standardized version. Case 0, we have 2 statements. Case 1, we have 2 statements. Case 2, we have 2 statements. So not as concise, but notice it fixed all my indents. All my indents are aligned perfectly now, even up here. So that source format can really clean up your code. But in this case, it makes it a little bit longer. So let's go ahead and run this. And I'm going to say the year is 2023. This is year of the rabbit. Okay. So rabbit was 7. So when I divide 2023 by 12, I get a remainder of 7. And 7 matches this case. It jumps down here. Does this. When it hits break, it jumps down to the end of the case statement, and we don't have any more code to run, so the program ends.